Rugby Roots is brought to you by Compede Melbourne Nomad Sevens. Visit the top link in the description for more information. Welcome to Rugby Roots, a show where we discover how our favourite players found their love for the game. In this episode, I am joined by the Prem Rugby legend, that is Alex Goode. Hello, Alex, how are you?
Yeah, very well, very well. Just trying to brave the heat at the moment. Obviously, very hot, so you can see me in my vest, trying to stay cool, really. But yeah, all good this end. Thank you.
Well, I want to get right into things because there's obviously a lot to cover. So where did rugby start for you? Where will your first taste of rugby come from?
My first rugby came from Cambridge Rugby Club. My brother was 3 years older than me, and he went down, and I wasn't allowed to play aged 4 years old, I guess, or three, and annoyed that I couldn't keep up with him. I had to wait until I was old enough, and at 6 or 7 years old, I went along to the Cambridge Rugby Club minis and started from there, really. And played all the way from Cambridge Rugby Club under the sevens, it would have been probably, all the way up until under 18s Colts, and then played for the first team as well eventually. So that was sort of the backboard and the sort of starting point for me. I played a bit at school as I got older in terms of sort of 11, 12 and stuff, but it was all from Cambridge Rugby Club, and I owe a big debt of thanks to them.
So when did things start becoming a bit more serious for you? Kind of talk me through your teenage years in rugby.
I think it's a question asked quite often is, how do you know, when do you know you're going to be a rugby player? How did you get into it? I think everyone knows playing professional sport, sometimes, you don't get to choose, unfortunately. And there's an element of making your own luck. There's an element of working hard, and there's being in the right place. And in my experience, I sort of was playing at school level and playing for Cambridge, and even at 15, really, I had a bit of a bad, broke my leg and a bit of an injury, and I didn't really play in terms of for Cambridge County or anything like that year. But I came back under 16s, and I played quite well in a county game and got noticed, I guess, and went on to got involved in Eastern Counties under 16 level, and then London South East and sort of the lower level, the sort of England A and B teams, and that was a sort of starting point, really. I think before that, coming from a small place in Cambridge, there was no professional clubs around there, there was no academies, and so I had no idea how good I was, or if I was good in terms of the rest of the country. And you always assume that there's bigger, better, faster, more skillful players out there. And it took me to go and play the England sort of A and B team and realise actually I was pretty good in comparatively to the country, but I wasn't the best, and I needed to keep working. So I did that, and then I went and changed schools and went up to Oakham School, and there was a good teacher there in Ian Smith, who'd been a Leicester coach, and Leicester great, really, hero, and he was very good at sort of making me a bit more, making me think about the game a bit more, really. And I had a bit of a setback at 17. I didn't make the England team a year early, and I was annoyed, but I sort of went back and thought I've got to work harder and do more. And then the next year I was in the England under 18s, and started to progress from there, really. And I got picked up by Saracens, and I've been there ever since, really. But it certainly wasn't smooth sailing, that's for sure.
Throughout all this, who was your rugby inspiration whilst you were growing up?
I think there was a couple of people on my journey. So my club coach at Cambridge from 7 until sort of 15 was a guy called Steve Wilson. Started off, his son was a player and he just wanted to coach, but he had some good ideas. Was a good coach, very, very old school. Certainly wasn't very professional, but he loved rugby and could see and wanted to do things that other coaches hadn't done, and was quite good at bringing ideas and giving me sort of not weapons, but things to play with in the game and to actually enjoy it a bit more. So he was brilliant, and he had massive belief in me. and then probably two teachers, particularly a guy called Mr. Mitchell was a teacher, was a headmaster till recently, when I was 11 to 13, and he was brilliant for me, only for 2 years, but brilliant coach, and really at that age got me thinking about the game like no other coach really, until I became professional. And he made me, not in a professional way, just asked me why I was making certain decisions on the field as a young kid, and I loved that, and made me think about the game more and discuss it, and that was brilliant. And then Ian Smith, who I mentioned before, Dos Smith, who was fantastic for the last 2 years before I went into a professional environment, and kind of demanded more of me as a school kid than the rest of the kids, because he knew that I had higher aspirations, and perhaps he saw talent in me that he thought, you can make something of this, make sure you don't waste it. So he was really important in that sort of aspect growing up.
You seem to play a lot of your early years at rugby at 10. Now, you obviously play most of your professional rugby now at 15 for Saracens. What differences do you find in your game when playing 15 in contrast to playing at fly half?
I think my natural game, was honed playing 10. I played 10 growing up, all the way up till sort of 2021. And still now, over the last 5 years, I've played in some very big games. Last year, not the season we're just in still, but the year before, I had to step in quite a few times, whether it be the final group game we needed to win against Glasgow, or quarter final against Glasgow late on because Owen was having a baby, etc. Like these kind of big games where we had to win. They weren't dead rubbers, and I really enjoyed it, to be honest with you. Very lucky to have a brilliant team around me, but the change up was fantastic, and I still have belief in myself that I can play at fly half and do a great job. But I think the big difference really is I see myself still playing as a fullback, but with using the mind of a fly half still, I think, because that's my skill set and background. It doesn't mean that I don't want to counter-attack, enjoy that side of things, the high balls, you've had to develop that side of it. And if anything, I put more time and effort in than most, because it wasn't something I did at a young age as much. But in terms of coming into the line and being another eyes and ears, and sort of talking to Owen as much as possible, really, as a 10 or whoever's at 10, I think is where I sort of thrive, being closer to the ball than perhaps normal fullbacks who like to be in the wider channels. I want to be there as a first receiver, second receiver. I want to help out with the kicking. I want to be talking. I want to be working and linking with the fly half as much as possible. A bit more like probably a rugby league fullback in that sense, in the middle of the field. But that aspect, you still have to do the other bits as well, and I enjoy that. So I think that's probably where it differs a bit, is even when I'm playing fullback, I want to be close to the ball, and when you're at fly half, you're always close to the ball.
So I want to take you back to the inaugural Junior World Cup in 2008. I spoke to Grayson Hart a few weeks back about this game, and he ended up on the winning side. But talk me through that final versus the All Blacks in Wales at the Junior World Cup.
It was tough. I think going into it, we hadn't exceeded expectations, but we had. It's safe to say we'd won the Grand Slam, and we were confident. But you never know with Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, or anything in that circumstance. And we'd had a really tough draw. We had to play Australia in the group, and then we had to play South Africa in the semi-final, and then New Zealand in the final. And the reality with that was we played 3 games against Southern Hemisphere, Tri-Nations, in the space of, I think it was about 8 days, 8 days probably. So tough enough. I had a humdinger against Australia and the likes of Willie Genia, Ndolo, to name Pocock, to name a few. And then went and played South Africa and Francois Hugard and the likes, Cecil Africa and those guys. And both games were tight, and we won. And we got to the final, and look, it was a solid first half. I actually missed to kick a goal, I think, but we had good possession. We actually managed to pin them back with our kicking game really well, and we were in a good place. We just couldn't quite get as many points on the board as we wanted. But at half time, it was pretty tight. Unfortunately, we got a red card about 55 minutes, was it, or so in. And you know, they were a better side. I think we can all put a hand up and say they were an unbelievable side. And there's no doubt about that. But unfortunately, going down to 14 men as well, the floodgates opened towards the last 15 minutes, and I think they scored 3 or 4 tries and they ran away with it, and that was disappointing. But you know, as I said, they were a better side than us, but we had a lot of guys who went on to achieve great things, which is amazing. And you know, it was a tough experience, but you know, to go and see the likes of Sean Maitland, obviously, who didn't make the team, Andre Taylor didn't start, but then Ryan Crotty, Robbie Fruin, Zach Guilford, you know, Israel Dag, I think was there. Aaron Smith didn't even make the starting team. You know, Sam Whitelock. They had plenty of amazingly good players, and it's not a shock that they all went on to do so well.
How valuable then are losses? I know it's a bit of a cliche, but how much do you learn from a loss as big as that from such an early age? I mean, under 20s, you have your whole career in front of you, and that's a big blow to take. How valuable was that loss to your career as a whole?
I think because it wasn't that close, it was easier to take. Probably, I think when it's really tight, it's quite hard. When you've been beaten by a better side, you're sort of annoyed, but you're like, you know, what can you do? I think it's important though. I think it's important. It drives you on to keep working. I think as well, you soon realise when you get into professional rugby that everyone in the first team has played for England under 20s or under 19s, and actually that's not a sign that you're going to go and make it. When you're in that environment, you think that you're going to be a professional player and that we're all going to make it in this under 20 side. The reality is it's not like that. So I think it's going back to your club and realising the hard work starts here. You've had your fun bit of playing 20s and no expectations and going out there, not too many people are watching, but you do well and you get noticed. But if you don't, no one really cares. And actually you've got to go and earn your contract now at your first team. So I think losses in general are brilliant and are great. They're very good in terms of resetting and understanding that you're not the best thing since sliced bread. But I also think setbacks are great for that. I think not being picked or setbacks are even more important because individually they hit you more.
So when joining Saracens, the club were just emerging to be the European giants that they are now. What was it like to walk into that Saracens dressing room as a youngster and see those faces that you grew up watching? Can you remember those first few games or first few seasons that you had at Saracens? What was going through your head at that point?
It certainly wasn't the European powerhouse that it has been recently. It was a openly underachieving club with a lot of global superstars, but wasn't successful, didn't win games from away from home much. The culture wasn't great, and you know it had one-off big games, but apart from that, it was quite poor. But you don't really notice those things when you arrive there, as I did. You just crack on and try and learn from everyone. But looking back, you know, there's a pre and post sort of Brendan Venter era, and before that, wonderfully good coaches we had, but the culture wasn't good enough. And actually, after Brendan, the quality of player straight after it was quite limited in comparison. But the characters of those players were fantastic. You know, everyone dug in, everyone was hungry for success or wanted to prove a point. And in Brendan, we had someone who galvanised the whole group and knew how to revolutionise a team, and he was exceptional in that. And he was the catalyst and set us on our way. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting first up going into the squad of people like Chris Jack, Census Johnson, Richard Hill, Thomas Castagned, you know, Brent Russell, all these people, and you're thinking, you know, but at the same time, looking back, you learn a lot more from the experience. And I'm glad I went through that and understood that a lot of the guys at Saracens now have only ever known winning. I'd seen both sides of it, so I can appreciate how good it was, and being in sort of a bit of a relegation fight, and how it wasn't that great. So actually appreciating what we do have was really important in that sense.
I want to focus now a bit more on your international career. As we've mentioned, you came through the age grade England rugby setup, and then on the 16th of June 2012, you made your Test debut for England against South Africa, coming off the bench. How would you describe walking out onto that pitch in an England shirt, and what emotions were going through your head?
Obviously very nervous. I never forget the national anthem. It was in Ellis Park. We did ours, and it was just the 23 or 22 players plus the staff. It felt like singing it. And you hear everyone's voice, and then South Africa sang their national anthem, and the noise was incredible. And you're like, okay. And the week before, we'd lost in a tight game and felt a bit disappointed. But they don't lose at Ellis Park often at all, not at this stage. And they were, I think, 4 tries up in the first 20 minutes. They came at us with a wave of physicality that I'd never seen, and just was smashing us. But you're there, you've been through the emotions of, it could be your first cap. You've had the messages beforehand from people who've helped you in your career and who are supporting you. And, you can't wait to get out there. But I guess covering as a fullback, you don't think you're going to get that long probably unless there's an injury. And as it was, I was the last one to get on. I think there was about 6 minutes to go. My dad had flown over actually, and he was speaking to my agent, I think it was, and was saying, it's always one that doesn't get on, isn't there? And then I did get on, and actually just ran around for 6 minutes, which if anyone tries to do that, you realise how knackered I was. I think I got the ball in one counter-attack and sort of scrambled along the floor a bit and made about 10 yards, and then just ran around following the ball, really trying to help out, hitting rucks, trying to be involved, and found myself exhausted. And everyone's like, "You played 6 minutes." just chase the ball. But somehow, I guess I showed enough in training, enough there for Stuart Lancaster to then start me the week later, really. But it was a special week. Even if it wasn't the biggest performance, it was a special week, really. And a lot happened, and it was really nice. Like I said, my dad came out and to sort of, to showcase to everyone who put so much into me and helped me on my journey that, I was making the most of it, really, and had sort of achieved that milestone.
You were then part of the squad selected for the 2012 Autumn Internationals, and because of an unfortunate injury to Ben Foden, you started all 4 games at fullback and played well enough to earn yourself a Man of the Match award against Fiji. This was a massive opportunity, which opportunities don't really come that often in a sport like rugby. How important do you think it is to kind of leave it all out there on the pitch, especially especially when luck is on your side?
I think I'd sort of gone away and really worked at my game for about 2 years prior to that. And I hadn't been involved in the Six Nations and the World Cup previously I hadn't been involved in. I was annoyed, but I had a whole year of working on that. And coming to the autumn, that was a second pre-season that I'd had with a new conditioner at club and really focused on the physical gains I could get. And change my mindset. But I'd helped myself on that tour to South Africa and in the Six Nations. I trained within the squad and I trained really well. I trained at fly half for a lot of it, and Stuart Lancaster had been, I think, quite impressed and had given me good feedback. And then during that trip to South Africa, I obviously didn't start the first, then was on the bench, but then started the final game and actually played really, really well. We drew that game. A couple of guys came in, showed what they're about. I certainly had a very good game. We're disappointed not to win it, actually. And I think from then on, Stuart had sort of been earmarking me to sort of go forward in the autumn internationals. I came back and played well for the club, and then came to that Fiji game and I felt confident. And I played well. Got man of the match, was great. And then unfortunately, although I played well in the South African Australian games, we didn't win them, annoyingly. But then it came to the final game against New Zealand, and again, I was really happy with how I played. And with everyone writing us off, we beat the All Blacks, which was not something anyone was expecting. And I'm not sure if we've beaten the All Blacks at Twickenham since. That was a special autumn series, and one that I really felt that I was like not had made it, but was certainly not, but was starting to get my imprint on the team and how I wanted to play, and that was important.
Some now back to domestic stuff. Some very successful years at Saracens meant that you kind of became a bit of a stalwart at Allianz Park. However, in the last few seasons, a few young names have started to pop out of that Wonder Kid factory, and two names stand out for me: Manu Vunipola and Max Malins. How good are these two, and how refreshing is it to see the future of the Saracens backline?
Well, I think Manu probably surprised a lot of people. He's not someone who has, to start with, isn't electrically quick or great footwork or makes breaks here or does the flashy things. What he does have, and it's a really, really underrated quality, and one that I certainly think is invaluable and will make him such a star, is he has a very, very cool temperament and a brilliant understanding of the game. He's an old head on young shoulders, effectively. When to kick the ball, when to be deep, when to be flat, when to run, when to slow it down. He really grasps that really well. And then you add in the fact that he's very solid defensively, passes well, sees opportunities, he knows to take the right options. These kind of sort of sexy things that he does, which are great, as opposed to all the breaks and the highlights reel. But he can still, use his footwork and beat people as well. So I think he's been a revelation even this year. People didn't know much about him apart from his second name, and actually he's come out of that shadow and shown, that he can lead the team around in games and show how good he is and nail big kicks. So he's brilliant. Max, again, we've seen glimpses of, unfortunately, a few injuries, but his ability his speed, his footwork, his ability to beat people and do something out of nothing is phenomenal. Certainly moving to fullback as well, I think has really helped his game, taking the shackles off a bit so he can just play and join in where he wants to join in and pick his moments. And certainly it helped me when I was developing as a fly half to go to fullback first. And similar for Max, if he does want to go back to fly half, then fine. But as a fullback, he's an unbelievably gifted player in that sense, and his ability, as I said, to come in and pick where he comes in and show that pace and athleticism is phenomenal.
Finally, any advice for any young rugby players watching who are looking to improve their game?
I think it's a bit boring in a sense, but the thing that I've always sort of listened to is it's what you do when no one's watching that matters. I think it's quite easy to, when you're doing fitness with your friends or kicking in front of people, you work harder naturally and you run faster and you make sure you hit the line every time for your reps or whatever you're doing. I think it's when no one's there and you're on your own, that's when it matters. Do you do all the goal kicks you say you're going to do? Do you do all the passes? Do you do the running and everything? And I think that's what's really stood out, I think, for the guys who've made it is, Owen Farrell and Maro Itoje, they work harder than any two in their position that I know. And it's because they never take a shortcut. They always just work harder and harder and harder. And I can tell you, they were not the most talented. Maro took up rugby late and he's worked incredibly hard at his game understanding, his passing, his skills, and he's one of the best players in the world. And Owen, his work ethic is phenomenal. So I think really there is no shortcut for success. It's hard work. But if you enjoy it and you have a passion for it, then you won't see it as hard work. You'll see it as fun.
Wow, thank you so much for joining me, Alex. It's been great to speak to you and hear about your rugby roots. Thank you so much for coming on. Thanks again to Compede Melbourne Nomad Sevens for sponsoring this video. Make sure you check out those socials which are on screen right now. And thank you to you for watching. Make sure you check out @YoungRugby on Instagram for everything Young Rugby, and we'll hope to catch you soon. Bye bye.